Now going to read from our second reading from the Gospel of John, the account of Jesus feeding the 5,000. And this is a miracle that appears in all four of the Gospels. Not many of those miracles appear in all four, but this one important for not only the early church and the early disciples, but certainly important for us. Reading from John chapter 6. After this, Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias, and a large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick. And Jesus went up the mountain, and he sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near, and when Jesus looked up and he saw the large crowd coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we going to buy enough food for these people to eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. And Philip answered Jesus, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get even a little." And one of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to Jesus, "Well, there's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many?" And Jesus said to them, "You make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in the place, so they sat down, about 5,000 in all. And then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, so also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments that are left over, so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the loaves and the fishes left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. And when the people saw the sign that he had done, they began to say, "This indeed is the prophet who is to come into the world." The Gospel of the Lord. Well, you do know, right, that every time we gather on Sunday, every time we gather for worship on a Wednesday or a Saturday or a Sunday, that we are having an Easter celebration. We're having kind of a remembrance and a celebration that Jesus came up out of the grave. This is the season of Easter, but every time we gather is a mini Easter, so let's give this a try. All right, you ready? He is risen. He is risen. He is risen. He is risen. He is risen indeed. But in all the events of Holy Week and Easter, with everything being so busy, I forgot to ask you, how'd you do in your March Madness NCAA basketball brackets? Everybody do okay? Anybody here do that? Did anybody pick Duke to win it all? Yeah, you got a few? All right, we can give you a round of applause. Way to go. That's nice. Good job. I had Wisconsin, I had the Badgers from the very beginning, and they came oh so close, but didn't quite make it. But we do need to say congratulations to Duke University Blue Devils and to Coach K. But speaking of Duke University, there's a great story that comes from the chaplain or former campus pastor at Duke University. He tells the story about how oftentimes he would get a phone call or a visit from a parent of one of the undergrad students who weren't quite happy with some of the things maybe that were going on through the campus ministry. And he tells the story that one time a father called, and the father was angry and he was upset because his daughter, who was graduating from Duke University, had decided to take a year off before she went to grad school and to go do mission work in the country of Haiti. And the father did not appreciate that, and he didn't like that decision. So the father called Bill Willimon on the phone, the campus pastor, and he said this, and he was yelling. He says, "Isn't that absurd? My daughter wants to go dig ditches in Haiti for a year. I can't believe it. She has a degree in chemical engineering from Duke University. She's on to graduate school, and she's going to go do that? Can you believe it? You are completely irresponsible," he said, "to have encouraged her to do this. I hold you personally responsible." And Willimon said, "Me? What do you mean, me? What have I done?" "Well, she came to trust you, and then you filled her head with all that Jesus stuff. She likes you. That's why she's going forward with this foolishness," the father said. "Now wait just a minute," campus pastor said. weren't you the one who had her baptized? Well, yeah, I had her baptized, but what's that got to do with anything? Well, and as she grew up, didn't you read her the stories of the Bible and teach her about Jesus and take her to Sunday school and let her go on the ski trip with the Presbyterian youth group to Vail in Colorado? Well, yeah, we did that. And didn't you tell her that her faith in God was important? Well, yeah, her mother and I told her that. And the campus pastor said, well, then it's your fault that she believed all that stuff, that God has got a hold of her, and that she's committed her life to Jesus. He said, it's not my fault, it's yours. You're the one who allowed her to sit at Jesus' feet and to learn from him about serving in this world and what it means to be a follower of Jesus, not me. And the father mumbled something like, but all we ever wanted her to be was a nice Presbyterian. Sorry, Willimon said, you've messed up, and you've gone and made her a disciple of Christ. You see, friends, Jesus takes this disciple stuff pretty seriously, however it plays out in your life and in mine. And as a congregation, as I said, we've been working our way through the Gospel of Matthew, and now we've arrived at the very end of this Gospel, with Jesus' final words. And he gives to the disciples, he gives to us, he gives to his church what we call the Great Commission. He gives to us our marching orders. Jesus has been raised from the dead. It's great news. We proclaimed that last week. But now what? Now what? Now what do we do? Now what's it all about? We have our gift of salvation. Now what are we to do with that? And Jesus looks at us today and he says this: all authority, the authority of God himself, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me, and I'm giving that authority, that power, you think about that, I'm giving that authority, that power to you. And he says, go with my authority, and you make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey all that I have taught you. And then he says, lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. He gives us our marching orders, and that is to be disciple makers. And in the reading from John 6 of the feeding of the 5,000, and we're going to take a look at that text from different Gospels over the next few weeks. But we get that same message. Jesus uses a boy, his sack lunch. Mom probably packed him a sack lunch, 5 small pieces of bread and 2 fish. And Jesus uses that which the boy offered to Jesus to feed thousands of people. He uses what we have to offer here in this place, around Sioux Falls, around the world, Christian congregations and churches everywhere, to take that which we offer to provide grace, love, and forgiveness. Jesus is the one who's doing the miracle, but he engages his disciples to be right in the middle of it. He says to the disciples, hey, we've got 5,000 people here. The disciples see this challenge. We don't have enough to feed them. Jesus, send them on home. And Jesus says, no, I'm going to perform a miracle here, and I want you to be right in the middle of it. I want you to participate in it. So there's a lot of grass, and Jesus tells his disciples, hey, Peter, you take this section over here. You make the people sit down. And Andrew, you go over there and you make the people sit down. And John, you go over there and you make the people sit down. And Bartholomew, you do the same over here. That's your section. And Jesus takes the 5 loaves and fishes. He breaks them. He distributes them to the disciples. And he says, now I want you to be part of this miracle. And the disciples take what Jesus gives them. They go to their section and they start breaking the bread and breaking this small amount of fish. And it keeps going. And it keeps going. And it keeps going. And everybody has enough to eat, and there's 12 baskets full left over. And I can just picture the disciples when this miracle has happened. Peter comes back up front and he tells his buddies, he says, hey, Andrew, you'll never guess what happened in my section. I just had a little bit of food and I kept breaking it and handing it out, and everybody had enough to eat. And Andrew said, that's amazing, Peter, because that's what happened in my section too. I just had a little bit of food and I kept handing it out, and everybody had enough to eat. And all the disciples are astounded that they are in the middle of this miracle that Jesus is doing. It's awesome. They all say the same thing. And he says, you can be part of it. Right here at Gloria Dei, we're in the midst of a miracle. We're in the midst of miracles happening all the time. Jesus is the one who's doing the miracles. Hundreds of people coming to faith, having faith nourished, all kinds of things going on. But you know what? He says to us, I want you to be in the middle of it. I want to use you. I want to partner with you. I want you to go and make disciples. That's my plan of salvation, for you to share it, for you to tell it, for you to live it out in your lives. We're part of it. And through the teaching of hundreds of kids, to youth group mission trips, to building Habitat homes, to proclaiming the message to hundreds each week, through the forgiveness of sin, through grief groups and divorce groups and small groups and Bible studies and music groups and quilting groups and preschool and owls, and on and on and on it goes in this place. The miracle of faith is happening around here. People are coming to faith. Faith is being strengthened. A difference is being made. And we are invited by Jesus to be part of that great mission. Here, take my grace, he says. Take my loaves and my fishes. Pass it out. Pass it out to your section. Wherever your sphere of influence is, you pass it out. You let people know. As the kids heard today, go fishing for people. Go and make disciples, baptizing and teaching. That's our mission. A few summers ago, my wife led a couple of high school youth groups on working mission trips to the country of Belize. She tells a story about one group of young people from Libertyville, Illinois, outside of Chicago. They were fired up for what they were doing, and when they got down to Belize, one of the things they did was to go door to door in this village where they were, this town where they were. And they would knock on people's doors, and they would say, hey, we're from Libertyville, Illinois, and from the church, and we just want to know if you'd like to visit a little bit, and if there's anything that you'd like us to pray for, we'll pray for you. And they said that about 90% of the people whose doors they knocked on in that kind of poverty-stricken area said, yes, we'd love to visit with you, and we'd love to have you pray together with us. And so the kids did that, and they were fired up about it. Go make disciples of all nations. But then they gathered at night, and their youth pastor kind of gathered them together, and he read for them Matthew 28, 16 to 20. Go make disciples of all nations, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, teaching all that I have commanded you, and remember I am with you always. And the kids were excited about doing that in the country of Belize. But that youth pastor was a wise person, and he brought it home to their level, and he said, you know what? You don't have to go to another country in order to do that and fulfill that great commission. And he asked the youth group, there were many, many friends of the youth group that were along on this trip, and he said, how many of you are not baptized? And there were about 14 or 15 kids of that group of 50 plus that had not been baptized. They had not been part of a congregation. They had been invited on that trip by friends. So the youth pastor said, how many of you would like to be baptized? And they all raised their hand. And so a couple weeks later, as they got back to Chicago, into the Chicago area, they had this grand celebration of 14 or 15 high schoolers being baptized. Go and baptize. Go and bring people to me. Jesus uses a very tangible physical sign in baptism to say, you are part of my family. I love you. You belong to me. It's an awesome reality, this gift of baptism that we have. It's great to go to Belize, but you and me, most of the time, our opportunities for making disciples are right here. Right here in this place, right here in our neighborhoods, right here in our workplaces, right here in our own sphere of influence. Last week on Maundy, Thursday, we celebrated the baptisms of Lucy and Allie Davis, ages 9 and 7. This weekend, 2 last night, 1 more at the 10:30 service, 3 babies were baptized. Last year in 2014, 42 baptisms. This month alone, there are 7 here at Gloria Dei. Jesus connects very closely, making disciples with baptizing. Go, make disciples, baptize. And parents and sponsors and the church all partner together in this mission of being disciple makers as God claims people as his own. And we've got young adults, and we've got youth, and we've got older adults at Gloria Dei that are putting their faith into action in all kinds of ways. You're doing it in all kinds of ways, including one recent college grad who's now in China for 2 years working as a Christian worker, committing before she moves forward with the rest of her life. You see, the one who raised Jesus from the dead is not just some tame, make-believe God, make-believe deity. This is a God who grabs hold of you and me at baptism, and thank God, he never, ever, ever lets go of us. And that's both exciting and scary at the same time. If you aren't yet, or your kids aren't yet baptized, come and talk with me or Pastor Lauren or Pastor Dwight. We'd love to talk to you about the beginning of this exciting journey of discipleship. And at Gloria Dei, we take that commission very seriously to go and make followers of Jesus. That's why we're very excited about our Loaves and Fishes capital campaign. It isn't a campaign that is just about paying down our mortgage or reducing our debt. It is that. But we are tackling this very, very aggressively because together with Jesus, we are in the disciple-making process. And as we eliminate our mortgage debt, just imagine the possibilities that God has in front of us. Everything from finishing out this 39-acre master site plan to live streaming our worship services to some rural congregations who have asked to see if when they don't have pastors available that we could live stream part of our worship, to answering the call to greater even mission and outreach, to putting even a greater emphasis on small group ministry and young adult ministry, adult education, Bible study. Expanding our preschool. Our preschool is filling up and overflowing. Working with Jesus to make sure that the thousands of people who are moving into this southeastern part of Sioux Falls over these next few years have an invitation to come and hear and know Christ in a very real and personal way. That's our mission. And this is an amazing mission center that Christ makes miracles happen all the time. At this point, I want to invite Kurt Holman. He's a member of our capital campaign team, and that team has been working hard and diligently to come forward and share a little bit about our Loaves and Fishes.
Good morning. Life is so busy, isn't it? There's hardly any time to do anything. And if you're like me, you're busy too. We have big work commitments, moving our kids from event to event, getting the oil changed, maybe picking up a loaf of bread or a gallon of milk at the store. Then there's texts and tweets and voicemails and emails and Instagram. The list just kind of goes on, doesn't it? These are necessary tasks, but they keep our lives so busy, and there's hardly time to do anything else. My favorite story from the Bible is about a guy named Elijah. Even though he's 3,000 years older than I am, I can relate to some of the things that he went through. He found himself completely stressed out and looking for answers. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? So he went searching for comfort in a message from God. He climbed a mountain and listens to God's booming voice coming through loud and clear. He strained to hear God through the wind, the thunder, and the earthquakes. He was disappointed because he didn't hear a thing. Then, when things got quiet and Elijah quieted himself down too, he heard God's voice in a whisper. I keep listening for God's messages to come through to me loud and clear and on my terms. Instead, when I do hear God's message, it's usually in a whisper. Soon, each of you will be receiving an envelope inviting you to give towards the Loaves and Fishes campaign. When I first opened up my letter, I heard voices all right. It was my own voice saying, "You can't afford this. There's so many bills to pay, there's college to save up for," and the list goes on and on. However, it is my hope that you quiet yourself to hear God's whisper in you. The whisper that says, "This is important. This is a priority, and I will provide abundance in your life." I hope that you listen to that whisper.
Thanks, Kurt. For us at Gloria Dei, we want to just encourage as close to 100% participation as we can in this Loaves and Fishes campaign. For us, it's going to be very successful in that all of us, even if we bring just a little, like that boy with 5 loaves and 2 fish, if you can bring a little, that's awesome. God takes it and uses it. If you can give a larger gift, I ask you to pray about that and to stretch yourself for that, because God uses all sizes as He takes our hearts and makes a difference in people's lives. Hold on to your baptismal promise that you belong to God and that God is with you always. Emmanuel, God with us, now and forever. Thanks be to God. Amen.